The fifth episode of Skeleton Crew is easily my favorite of the series so far. It had so much going for it. A small check-in with the parents, some great comedy, wonderful character moments, and Indiana Jones-style booby traps, but in Star Wars, and an all-around incredible ending. This was a great Christmas present. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, by the way. I'm in my Star Wars PJs, and Molly got me the Onyx Cinder, which feels even more appropriate now. I admit I was a little slower to warm up to this series than most, but I have been fully hooked now. So let's talk about You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates. I'm glad we got to see what the kids' parents are up to. That was one thing I felt was missing in episode 4. Just a quick check-in at the start, that's all I need. I love seeing all of them working together to break some laws and get a message out beyond the barrier, and I like that they're not good at it. Wendell sweats through stealing the access code and bumbles his way through talking with the droid. Honestly, his clumsiness reminds me of his own son's attempts at heroism later on in the episode. Fortunately, he's got a friend in Farah who is still trying to go through the proper channels, but is convinced to join the other parents. It's interesting that Wendell insists they can send a vague message that doesn't give up At-Aten's location, so the people of this planet do know they need to keep their world a secret. I wonder what else they know that they're not sharing. Back with the kids, we get to learn more about SM-33 and his old captain and the ship, which I love. This series has set up several mysteries, and it's doing a great job at trickling out answers that feel significant and intriguing. The legend of Tak Rened is no different, and it's a nice touch that Jod used Rened's beard as an exclamation in episode 4. This is a big-time pirate that people tell stories about, like Blackbeard, and the Onyx Cinder is like Queen Anne's revenge. I like that Jod gets swept up into the story, kind of like Wim talking about the Jedi, because he knows these legends, and the kids simply don't. SM-33, who has calmed down thanks to KB, tells them At-Aten's coordinates are kept in the captain's log in Rened's lair, and then he easily breaks out of his restraints to take them there, which was delightful. The comedy in this series has all worked for me, but this episode was full of great new 33 moments. He goes on to explain that Rened was betrayed and died during the journey to At-Aten, but he crashed the ship into the planet as his final act, killing everyone on board. Which sounds plausible. I think I'll believe that for now, but there have been lots of theories popping up that maybe the captain is still alive and living on At-Aten, maybe even as the supervisor, which I also think is kind of plausible. I'll talk about that more later, but SM-33 isn't the most reliable, and we've seen several cases of people altering droid memories in this series. Wim wanders off to have a little cry, which is perfectly understandable, but he's caught by Jod, who clearly wants to get away as fast as possible, but gets pulled into helping this kid. At least it's his version of helping. I do think their interaction is sincere, even if I think Jod's advice isn't good. Wim admits that his search for excitement and adventure wasn't what he thought it would be. Every little kid wants to grow up, and then once they get there, they realize life isn't how they thought it would be. It's not like we all read about in children's stories, where good always triumphs over evil, and it's always obvious who the villains are. Life is confusing, and it's scary, and it always will be. That's a lesson Wim shouldn't have had to learn so early. But he also shouldn't have lost his mom so young. He's had to grow up fast, and I feel for him. I think Jod does too, knowing that Wim has truly lost his mother. He tells Wim to forget all attachments because they'll only hold him back. He says he forgot all of his attachments. He has no real friends. It's just a pirate crew that will happily mutiny if he doesn't lead them to treasure. Not a single person we've met in this story knows his real name. He truly has no one. He tells Wim to focus on his imagination and his stories because his focus determines his reality. So we've got two pretty stark Jedi phrases in this conversation, and they feel very different from the stupid platitudes he was dropping in episode 3. Jod's origins are still up in the air, but if I had to make a guess right now, I think he's a Padawan who survived Order 66. He seemed to sympathize with Wim's loss of a parent, and he may have lost his master. He may have received some teachings in the Force, but they were incomplete. He goes on the run, and he does what he has to do to survive. He hides his identity, uses false names, and loses himself along the way. SM-33 takes the kids to the planet Lanupa to find Rened's lair hidden within Skull Ridge Mountain, which has been turned into a sandal-style, adults-only resort, which becomes the source of some excellent comedy for 33, who bemoans the downfall of his former home. While Jod bribes his way into the resort, he's approached by a bounty hunter he knows named Pocket, and she is just plain rad. I love that character design. She reminds me a lot of Barash Sylvain, so she might be a Cage. I don't know for sure, and I do not care. She was awesome and all but assures Jod that she'll be calling the rest of the pirates to Lanupa. Just like I missed the parents in episode 4, I was also hoping the pirates would be back this week, and I'm so glad they are. Pocket says she bounty hunts for a private client outside of the guild. I wonder if we'll find out who that is. I could see her being a character that pops up in another Mandoverse show, or The Mandalorian and Grogu or something. Maybe she works for Rada the Hutt. Anyway, now Jod and the kids have a ticking clock to find Rened's lair, which should be through the mud pits. That causes some concern for KB, which is yet another thing I'm happy to see in this episode. I like KB, and Kiriana Crater is doing a wonderful job playing her, but she simply hasn't been given as much attention as the other kids. Since the first episode, I felt like I had a solid grasp on what Wim, Fern, and Neil all want and what their character arcs could be. We've seen their hopes and dreams and fears, but we haven't gotten much for KB. So seeing twice this episode that she has a fear she isn't being completely honest about is a good start. I think we still need more, and I wish this had happened in the first half of the series, but better late than never. We also see Jod finally starting to snap by yelling at all the kids when they act like kids. Not only are the rest of the pirates after them all, but he has clearly been struggling to be an employee to a bunch of children. That of course comes back at the end of the episode, but for now he lays down the law, splits them into groups, and they begin their search. In the mud pits, we see a little alien that first appeared in The Last Jedi, and he gets eaten by a Hutt? But he pleads not again, so has he been eaten before? He seemed just resigned to his fate, not like in a death is imminent kind of way. That was so delightfully weird. We also see a bunch of Munes in the mud bath, which is a great touch after the mention of the banking clan being at the resort. And then we meet Catholops, who appears as this giant scary beast in the dark and then winds up being just a chill dude who wants to hear a great story and can apparently sniff out a rat because he's something like the 4th person to tell the kids not to trust Jod. I love that this episode did so much weird stuff and treated it completely normally. That is such a Star Wars vibe for me. Catholops opens the way to Rened's lair, and they continue on with the pirates close behind. We get to see some fun Indiana Jones-style traps along the way, and I'm always a sucker for that kind of thing. The Bad Batch had its fair share of similar traps that also clearly took inspiration from Indy, but I especially loved this episode and the use of repulsor lifts into spikes. In a chamber of acid, we get the title of the episode said aloud as Jod tells the kids they have a lot to learn about pirates. They think one of them will have to make the ultimate sacrifice to get through, their life. But Jod knows a pirate values money above all else. He values money above all else, including the lives of the kids. I think that'll change over the course of the rest of the series, but right now he is all about the money. He tosses the final Old Republic credit he has into the acid, and the way to Rened's vault opens. That room was awesome. I look forward to re-examining everything in there. My fingers are crossed the Ryloth arc could make an appearance. I loved Wim seeing the lightsaber on the pedestal, and I applaud him for showing some self-restraint for once. And I love that it looks like it belongs in the Old or High Republic with that light metal and gold color scheme. The kids and Jod find the coordinates to At-Aten, as well as a recording of Rened where we learn that the kids' homeworld is the final Old Republic mint where they make all those shiny gold credits. I do think it's curious that we don't see Rened's face. When that happens, I always wonder if that means it's a face we would recognize. It's also possible they don't want to define what he looks like yet, if they want to use the character in future stories. But going back to those Rened is the supervisor theories, I do think there could be some story sense to that. A man who lost everything to gain the planet of eternal treasure, the exact same path Jod is taking. Rened may have crashed on At-Aten, adjusted SM-33's memory to fake his death, and somehow taken over as supervisor. Then he's just controlling At-Aten and hoarding all the money it makes, like a dragon in fantasy, or a CEO in reality. Maybe he's a long-lived species, or maybe he died a long time ago, but if he programmed the security droids to be super loyal the same way he did to SM-33, they could have simply kept society going for 1,000 years. I don't know, I'm spitballing, and I think we'll have all that answered by the end of the season, but for now, let's talk about Jod. I absolutely thought he would do something to betray the trust of the kids, but I didn't for a second consider he could have challenged Fern to a duel to become captain. That was shocking and yet so simple, and something that was spelled out to the audience episodes ago. That's another thing the series is excelling at, set up and payoff without being too obvious about everything. Jod taking control from Fern like that makes it clear he was simply biding his time until he no longer needed to use the kids. Wim stepping out with the lightsaber had me so hyped up, but then him turning it on upside down was phenomenal, hilarious, and heartbreaking all at the same time. We all know how much a moment like that meant to him, and he messed it up. He couldn't be there to save someone when she needed his help, and he had to just cower with the rest of the kids. I hope he gets another moment like that to be the hero, even if it's not with a lightsaber. But Wim does get his friends to safety by pressing a button, which is a pretty great mirror of how he got them all into this mess in the first place. Alone in the lair, Jod takes up the lightsaber and ignites it. I'm not fully convinced he is a Jedi or a former Padawan, but if he is, I think it would be awesome for him to eventually wield that weapon the way it's meant to be, in defense of light and life. Hopefully forsaking the treasure to save the kids, to be the Jedi Wim thought he was and wanted him to be. And if that all happens on At-Aten, where Jedi have seemingly fallen into myth, I think that could be excellent. But for now, I simply loved this episode. It's my favorite of the bunch by far. Fun, weird, exciting, engaging. It just ticked all the boxes for me. So I'll just leave you with that for now because it's late and it's Christmas. We're not going to do our after show stream today. We're spending time with family, but tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, we will be back to talk some more and answer any questions you have. And then next week's episode will also be interesting to cover with New Year's. We're hosting a party with all our friends, so my review probably won't be out until January 2nd. For now, let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on our socials, and consider checking out our Patreon page, where we're posting reactions and watch-alongs for each episode. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.